Brad, I'm going to take you back. Remember October 2001?
Oh, yeah. The jury hunt?
The jury?
Oh, yeah.
You do remember it.
Just so we know, Dan shot a buck fawn, which that meant his buck tag was taken, so now he can only shoot a doe.
I have to interject after this, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. And it was, I shot a big deer, so I turned into the cameraman, and we get to hunt together. Now, you can tell your end of the story.
All right. So, to my defense, I show up at this hunt. Love Mark and Terry. They've been friends of ours for decades. But Terry pulls me aside and says, "No one will kill does. We know you. You have a reputation." It's the first time I ever hunted with these guys. "You have a reputation that you like to kill does." I said, "Yes, that's me. Could you please kill some does?" I said, "Absolutely." So we get up in the stand. It's me and one of their new camera guys, and he knows who he is. He still works for them, I believe. And he said, "You really do me a favor here. You really do me a solid because I've never filmed a kill before." So here's me trying to play TV star, which even to today, we don't feel like we are.
No.
And here comes a doe and a fawn down the hill. Two fawns. It was a buck fawn and a doe fawn. And then I turn, like, in all my sage wisdom, like, you don't want to kill a fawn because you might be killing a buck fawn. So those two deer walk away. Lo and behold, it's coming to be dusk. Here comes a single deer down the hill. And I'm looking at it. He goes, "Oh, man, this is going to be great video. This is going to be great video." And so I shoot the deer, and it turns out to be a buck fawn. So, anyways, some people got their noses out of joint, and it's all long water under the bridge. But now we fast forward to like 2 days later, and they send us off to another spot to kill another doe.
Yes.
They gave me a reprieve.
So here's my part of the story is, first what Dan missed in between those 2 days, he went out once by himself, and 150-inch deer comes right underneath you. I don't know, do you remember? You videotaped that big deer.
I don't remember.
And we didn't have a camera guy, and you couldn't shoot it.
Oh, my gosh, that's right.
But now I'm the camera guy because I shot one. The first stand that we get in, you got to remember, Mark and Terry both have long legs. I have long legs. And literally the steps are so far apart, we can't even get Dan up in the first set. So I know where another set is. I'm like, oh, let's go over this spot. I've sat there in the past because I've hunted with Terry multiple times. And we go over there. Again, we can't get Dan
These steps, I swear, are like 4.5 feet apart. You'd have had to been like a gymnast. Well, you got up there.
Yeah. So the funny part of the story is, so Dan decides, we just make the determination, it's already getting light. He's going to go down on the bottom of the tree, and he basically has one little lane to shoot out to the field.
Sitting on the ground.
Sitting on the ground.
Ditch.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm up in the tree, 24 feet probably up in the tree, and it's not long, and I see a doe, and I give him the signal, doe's coming. Well, Dan's down there, and it's just this little window, but what he didn't realize is my window was a little different than his window. So this doe comes through, and I see him,
monster doe.
Yeah, I see him pull back his bow, and I'm like, no. I'm trying to tell him not to shoot because I don't have it on film. And boom, he smokes it. I can see it naked eye. I just can't get the camera on it because of the angle with the arm and everything else. And he smokes his doe, and she runs a little ways over and falls over. And I get a little bit of that on video, but then I film him, and he's just jumping up and down like all jacked up. And
you got a good memory.
And so excited. And I let him spiel on, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that I didn't get any of the harvest on film.
Didn't get anything on film?
Nothing, because literally where that doe came in, it was through a wall of brush, and the camera couldn't get on it, and you shot her before. She only needed to go about that much further. But
what was cool about that was, to end that story, it was a ditch, and I was sitting on the ditch, so when I released that arrow was like this high off the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an awesome... So, okay, so that's our way of backing in here is that was 23 years ago. Amazing. And I'm not going to make anybody feel young here, but we have producers who were in diapers then. And our television show started 20 years ago.
Yep, shortly after.
So shortly after, so when we had, people ask me all the time, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Facebook, all the time. They're like, how does it feel to be a TV star? I'm like, I'm not a TV star. I mean, do you ever feel like that? I mean, I know you've been on TV as long as I have been.
No, not at all. I mean, like when we started the Inception, we always said the tagline was, "We're the deer is the star of the show," and I think both of us have that same attitude. And I can take TV or leave it. I have just as much fun hunting, literally probably more fun without the camera. And we can get in this later, but that camera's cost me so many deer. I mean, I like big deer after big deer after big deer.
That's like when people come in our office, all these racks are deer that I've killed on TV. Most of them are 2.5-year-olds. And you get the average punk, I'll say, it comes in, nice bunch of 2.5-year-olds. I'm like, that is the accumulation of 20 years of trying to kill a deer on television. Which is hard.
It's amazing how much harder it is between the communication and everything that can go wrong. I'm going to give you one story that something went wrong with one of our former producers. So we're in Montana, great spot hunting with Montana Whitetails Inc., Keith Miller. He puts us in this spot. 2 bucks pop out at the end of the field. They're 450 yards away. One is obvious.
I don't know if I remember this. Keep going.
One is obviously bigger than the other one. One's a 145-inch deer, which for Keith's place is great. But honestly, we would have probably killed the other one as well. He's a 130. And they come all across this field. And we're in an island in the middle of the field, and the does are eating 20 yards to my left. And these bucks are coming for those does, right? I mean, they're definitely going to be there. So camera guy asked, which one are you going to shoot? The one on the left, right? I'm going to shoot the one on the left. He's the biggest. Well, on their way over for 400 yards, they switch spots. So next thing you know, a doe comes in out of nowhere. I'm in a 12-foot ladder stand, and you've hunted Montana before. Yeah. Some of the trees aren't big, right? So you're and this doe is on a trail that comes to the base of the ladder, and she's right underneath the stand. And I'm looking at her, and I can hear the camera guy moving, and she can hear it. I can see her ears twitching. And next thing you know, I hear him whisper, "Which one are you going to shoot?" And I'm trying to be as quiet as possible, and her ears are going, and I'm like, one on the left. The opposite deer now from he came out on the right, and now he's on the left, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. But, and he can't hear me, and he's starting to panic, right, because the bucks are getting closer. So he says it louder. And I whisper again, and the doe, you can see her start freaking out. And finally, he does it again, and she takes off and runs through that herd and takes both bucks away. And I was like, I was going to shoot the big one on the right. I was so pissed because literally he should have known, right? I mean, he should have known we were going to shoot the bigger one. They're both going to come in, but for whatever reason, and I'm sure it's different on their end, right? They're trying to make sure they get all the footage. He probably wanted to make sure he had it just on the close-up, whatever. I'm not making excuses, but it's one of those deals where, again, it cost me a 145-inch deer, and rather than shoot a deer on the second day of the hunt, we lasted all week. I mean, we killed one.
Did you wind up killing?
Yeah, we killed a little, like a little 120-something that was an older buck, but not nearly as nice as the one we had. Yeah, exactly.
You remember my one with, was hunting with Brad Harris out in Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
Now, to the flip side there, is I didn't care. Andy Swift, who's probably listening to this, he was my camera guy. And it was before we even started. We're going to get to this. But basically, that buck was a 167-inch buck.
Giant.
We're sitting turkey hunting style. That deer is at 8 yards. And he's facing the other way. And I just said, I'm really sorry, man. And I put the rifle up and I shot that buck. But we learned through television that you can't do that.
Yeah.
You really have to show restraint. But let's start, Brad. Deer and Deer Hunting TV, 20 years. This is our 20th year on television.
Yes. So the whole process, I'm going to give Deb Knauer, which is our former publisher, some kudos here.
First boss.
Yeah, she kind of saw the writing on the wall, and this goes back when the Outdoor Channel, when nobody knew about it, like when they'd throw a party and there'd be 10 or 15 guys from the industry with a bunch of
1990s.
Yeah, with a bunch of no names that nobody knew would be there eating their free shrimp and drinking their free beer. We were part of that, but we never jumped on the channel. But Deb saw kind of like, the foresight to see that TV was going to be popular. And even though we didn't launch that show back then, she invested in a couple cameras.
Remember those cameras?
Oh, yeah.
What were they, like Sony's? I think they were like 10 grand a piece.
They're expensive, right?
And they were just little, like, if you looked at them today, they'd look like almost like Sony Handycams. They were nicer than that. But.
Yeah. And then the one big, remember she had the one big camera.
Remember
and
carrying those things around?
oh my God. And then we
We
didn't.
had no clue.
And then we didn't know what to do, and people are trying to sell film and kill a deer. I think we filmed for an entire year, and other than getting some B-rolls from deer, we didn't kill
We had
squat.
we're holding the camera.
Yes, no tree arms, no nothing.
I just remember look, see, I got a deer on video.
Yeah.
That was like, to give anybody who's listening to this who might be younger some perspective, this was uncharted. We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
We didn't have iPhones. See, there we go, right there. This is it.
Oh yeah, that's the one I ran. The
Remember
old
this
JVC. That is the one I ran.
JVC, remember that?
Yeah, and the other one was smaller. It was silver, and that one was a Sony.
The other one was silver. That was about this size. So if you guys are watching the video version of the podcast, what I'm showing the video viewers, this thing's got to be 20 inches long.
Oh yeah.
It weighs probably close to 10 pounds.
And now we're shooting higher quality video cameras that are half this size,
We
and
shoot stuff
there's
on
total
phones
light.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's just amazing how much lighter
And the
they
beta
are.
cameras that those guys were running, like the Drury's and
Bigger.
Outland with Brad Harris, those were monsters.
Yeah.
That weighed like 50, 60 pounds. I'm not kidding. That Troy Ruiz took me on a turkey hunt with Cuz and Mossy Oak. And I said, I'll carry that camera. And I picked it up. I'm like, no, I won't.
And think about that. When those guys are doing elk hunts, they're carrying that thing all day long, and the battery packs were so much bigger. And for you guys to have a little perspective, Drury launched his show the same year that we did. So anybody that's watching Mark Drury's television show, it's as old as ours.
It's
I mean,
as
you
old as
don't
ours.
really think about it.
20 years.
Yeah.
So I'm going to touch on what you said. That was the Outdoor Channel launched in '94. Debbie furthered that idea in 1997.
Is that what it was?
But we didn't start until, it would have been 2005.
Yep.
Because if you add them all up, this is the 20th season coming up. So it took us a while. It took us more than 5 years, 6, 7 years before we had some change in managers and things like that. And then we got going. But the other thing, too, was now, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brett. I think we started on Versus.
Yeah, so and that's now NBC Sports,
Right.
the old Versus network, and then we went over to the Outdoor Channel for 1 year, and we killed it on the Outdoor Channel. So much in that we were on Sunday nights. I'll never forget this. Had a time slot that it wasn't even prime. It was before the old Thompson Center block started, and honestly, our show was outperforming like 4 or 5 shows in their block. So the next year, the Outdoor Channel extended that block and put our time slot in there because they knew it could perform if you have a good show, and TC wasn't our sponsor, and they booted us out of that spot, and then they wouldn't give us anything good, and probably rightfully so. I mean, OSG is one of our competitors now, right?
So people know Outdoor Channel is owned by the same people who own like North American Whitetail, Bow Hunter, Peterson's Bow Hunting, which now is part of Bow Hunter, but those competing magazines.
Yeah.
And everybody thought, well, Deer and Deer Hunting is a magazine, but now this is when we were truly expanding.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how that stuff happened.
Exactly. And then when we didn't get a good airtime there, we jumped over to the Sportsman Channel because at that time that was an independent, so we aired on there several times.
Out of Milwaukee.
Yeah, out of Milwaukee. Super nice people. And then what happened there is OSG ended up buying that as well. So now they own Outdoor Channel and Sportsman Channel. And that's when we went over to our new partner, Pursuit, and have been there ever since.
Which has been an awesome partner.
Yeah, they've treated us extremely well.
We cannot say enough about Pursuit, not just because of the people that are there, because it's real hunters and fishermen, trappers. I mean, real deal people. I'm not saying that other people aren't, but the Pursuit people are that, and it's a family-run business.
Yeah, and my one bitch probably would have been that they didn't air everything on each day HD, right? Because you could watch our show, and heck, just a couple of years ago, we were watching it in camp with a bunch of our sponsors in Illinois, and they're like, your footage isn't that good. And no, it's good. I went and got my laptop, and they're like, well, that kind of sucks. But
that's all changed.
Yeah, Pursuit just got a new investor involved. They're going to be, you're going to see it in HD, which is going to be a lot better for all of us. It's going to make you guys, the viewers, a lot happier because now literally what we see in the field is what you're going to see.
And the other thing that I have to bring up, because a lot of people probably our age and older saying, well, I don't get Pursuit. Don't worry about it. You can download their app, Pursuit Up. You can watch it on our YouTube page. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch the television show If you're listening to this podcast, you can watch our television show, and you can watch all of them. They're all on there.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse saying, "Oh, I don't get the channel." There's millions of ways. Up in Canada, you can watch it on Wild TV. There's
for free.
Waypoint. Yeah. I mean, there's a million different ways you can watch.
Yeah.
Deer and deer hunting TV. We're talking about those old times, which seems so long ago, but it really wasn't. Remember the things that we used to do? Well, first of all, when we first started, here's a random whitetail fact of the day for you. Is Babe Winkleman his company produced those was it the first 2 years?
First one, I think it was.
I can't even remember.
Yeah, it was the first year. And then we actually won an award for one of the shows.
Right.
And they had an independent contractor do that show, and we ended up hiring him as the head producer.
Was that the show with Dick Bernier?
Yeah, yeah.
Dick Bernier was a longtime, rest his soul, good friend of Charlie, rest his soul, Charlie Alsheimer. He was a master tracker from Maine. And we did a show about tracking bucks in the snow, and that was fabulous. But then, then it came out to where we brought that in-house to, okay, so we're Media 360 now. There's, like 9 or 10 people in this office?
Yeah.
Back then, we were corporate.
Yeah.
And we brought it in-house, which nobody was doing.
Yeah.
So you knew it good, Brad, because you dealt with all the advertisers. How was that received? Mossberg has been supplying American hunters with quality firearms for over 100 years. Over the years, they've upheld their commitment to innovation by creating a handful of firearms that have shaped the way we hunt today. For more information, visit mossberg.com.
Right away, they were a little bit worried about the quality until we could show some of the footage that we had. And we did some cool things. And you know this, Dan, but a lot of you guys that have never seen the older shows, it's pretty amazing. We put a full-size oak tree in the warehouse.
White oak.
White oak, and hung a tree stand in it so that we could recreate the shots. And then we did a thing on shot placement. Where we say the deer's the star of the show, we really want to try to educate people on either whitetail facts, whitetail biology, any of that type of information that makes you a better hunter, including shot placement. A lot of times back then, people were taking bad shots, right? The deer is quartering towards them, they'd take a shot. There's so many opportunities, and we're trying to educate them. But we did so much cool stuff, and then we had the shot simulator. You remember that? Which was app, which was a super cool app. You could literally turn a deer. You could shoot it directly from underneath. You could basically take that whitetail, manipulate it any which direction that you wanted, hit it with your finger, and it'd either put an arrow or a bullet hole on it, and then it would tell you the best course of action, and what you hit.
We first did that. We had it on a DVD.
That
people could take and put in their computer. That white oak, that thing was, I'm not kidding you guys, it was a 30-inch base white oak that somehow they lifted into this warehouse, stood it up,
bolted it to the floor,
it down, and we put tree stands in it, and that was some of the coolest stuff we did. Now, I agree with you that I believe wholeheartedly, next to the National Bow Hunting Education Foundation, deer and deer hunting has to be the source for shot placement, and it's helped so many hunters that probably today don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Where the liver is. You know how it's in there perpendicular. You know it's to the right side of the insides. People didn't know that stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
They were just like putting an arrow through and just guessing. The other thing that I thought was very helpful from those early years. Remember when we did you're talking about the shot simulator. Remember we were standing around that table and we rated the shots?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we would have videos of, a lot of it was supplied video. Some guy was filming his own hunt. And then we had the segment, and then it was you or me or somebody else from the staff would come on and say, okay, here's the shot. We'd show it. And then you'd rate it. And I think we should probably bring that back for a little bit because I think it was very helpful.
It is all good stuff. It is, people just don't think enough about the animal and the exit hole and, in some of the things that are important, especially the new generation, right? I mean, you're so quick. People are taking those bad shots again, or they think that a crossbow is a firearm. You know what I mean? There's a lot of those issues that you have, but it was one of the most popular segments. And you talked about people recognizing you or whatever. When I did the recap from the shows, because I was the simulator guy that always showed, man, I'd see people and they'd be like, oh, you're that shot placement guy. They didn't know who I was on a name, but they recognized me from the shot simulator. Now they'd recognize me because I'm so old, right? But
I get recognized today, 20 years later, and I'm still uncomfortable with it.
I do too.
I had the one here, it was 2 months ago with the cop, but he recognized me off my voice. I was with a friend, we're going to a basketball game, and the guy is like standing there, and I'm talking, I'm in the passenger seat, and he pulls out his flashlight, and he goes, what's your name? I said, Daniel. And he said, what's your last name? I said, Schmidt. And he goes, are you the guy that does the Deer Talk Now podcast? I said, yeah, guilty as charged. But I was always uncomfortable with that. I get it at Fleet Farm or the grocery store or somewhere where somebody, oh my God, are you the guy with Deer and Deer Hunting TV? And I was never, ever expecting.
Me either.
Never, ever expecting like, well, yeah, that's something we do, but it's, I think that's different. I think for all of us here. And it's to that credit. Basically, you know, as a journalist, for me, it was like what you said. I want to educate people on the truth, whether it's shot placement or deer anatomy or deer biology, or just like if it's a thing about wolves and, you know, things like that. I can't think of anybody that we've even had, not even on our staff, but a contributor that I would call a quote-unquote celebrity.
No, and it's because of the concept of the show, right? I mean, we're just trying to do more of that whitetail information. And we see the celebrities, right? Honestly, I don't want to be them. I don't want everybody to take their picture with me. I mean, that's just not my personality. I'm more than willing to talk to somebody that does recognize me, right? You know, and talk to them and have a conversation about whitetails. But I'd rather keep that deer as the star of the show.
And it's not to say anything bad about the other shows, because we're friends with all these other people. Like, well, let's talk about Lee and Tiffany and Pat Nicole and Jim Shockey, and there's other people who are legit. Ted Nugent's a good friend of mine. You know, that are legit celebrities.
Yeah.
But it's two different types. Let's face it, this is entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
You know, television is entertainment, but ours is more educational entertainment as opposed to I don't know what you would call it with somebody else, but you know, I think there's it's just like if you're watching any other show, if you're watching Netflix or something like that, there's documentaries and then there's the make-believe stuff.
And if you look at content, just look at content alone, like those other shows, they're with one of those celebs all the time, right? Our show is literally showing more deer footage. And when you're talking about deer dispersal, right, we're showing the young bucks dispersing and why they're doing it. It's not so much, you know, the person. It's more about the animals.
And all the credit for that stuff goes to our root base. Our root base was the Stump Sitters.
Yeah.
Started in 1973, which gave way to Deer and Deer Hunting, which was the source for practical and comprehensive information. Guys like John Ozoga and Lenny Rue and Charlie Alsheimer and, you know, Bob Zaglin and people from across the country that gave us this base. It's not our knowledge. It's the knowledge from an entire North American people who embrace whitetails. Okay, so let me pause there for a second, Brad, and I wanted to say, so I get to go first because I know you're going to steal this. You have to pick your favorite contributor from the television show for over the years, and I'm going to start with Charlie.
Well, I knew you were going to take Charlie.
So I'm going to talk about Charlie, Charles J. Alsheimer. He was a dear friend of ours. He passed away in 2017. He worked as a freelancer for Deer and Deer Hunting for almost 30 years. He started in 1979. His contributions to the television show, I can't even begin to describe what Charlie meant, because when we were talking about the deer are the stars of the show, most of that footage came from Charlie's enclosure in New York. And it wasn't a hunting enclosure, it was a research facility. Had you ever been there?
No, I never got to see it.
Okay, I got to see it a couple times. All those pictures you saw that Charlie took, all the behavior that you saw on the snort wheeze that we had in the introduction for years. The deer jumping over a fence. I always said he had those things trained like dolphins. He could have that buck, and I was scared. It would come within a yard of you and start making a rub. But that's where we really started getting some of that. People are saying, how are you getting this footage? Well, of course you're not going out onto, some public land and getting a buck to come up and make a rub. But that's how we really got into the up close and personal.
Yep.
But then Charlie's his aura. He was a devout Christian. He was the most upstanding man that you would ever know, and his whole thing was kind of had his way about him. He kind of had that little. He was a basketball player. He was competitive, but he was confident, but also so humble that he'd always say, "Dan, pass it on. Pass on that knowledge, pass on whatever skill that you can to somebody else to allow them to further their career, their education, whatever it happened to be." But I would have to say Charlie Alsheimer would have to be my number one.
Oh, we had so many people, but the one thing that I always liked is when we got some of those biologists involved. Jeremy Flynn, you're doing it with Auburn right now.
Steve Hitchcock.
Steve Hitchcock. That's the stuff I like because, some of that information that is being portrayed, not only I don't know about some of it, but the average guy, if I don't know about it, I'm a whitetail geek. I'll not. You're a whitetail geek, man. And some of the research that they're doing to get that portrayed into the show is so cool because I think it makes us a better hunter overall. So, yeah, even today's, if you look at the contributors, there's not a bad one that we have in there. Kaiser does a great job. I think you two are very similar in that you get really excited when you shoot something, and Kaiser's just excited in general.
He's just excited in general.
Just the hand stuff, and I love that interaction. I just think it makes the show so much more entertaining when the person's passionate, and that's what we are.
I agree with you there. And that's what I also like particularly about Mark Kaiser, is that Mark has a different perspective because whitetail is a whitetail, but he's hunting whitetails. He's hunted across the world, but he's hunting whitetails in different environments than most people get to hunt or will ever hunt.
Exactly.
So, if you're looking at Wyoming or Montana or Colorado or, some of the western states, but he's also hunting in Kansas, and he's a great bow hunter, and he's a great gun hunter, and that brings a lot to the table. Like I said, that it might be a nice reprieve that you get to see, a spot. He's a great spot and stalk hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that footage that David has got is like where Mark is like, they call it the Kaiser crawl, and to me, it harkens back to the day when we were kids. And there wasn't a deer and deer hunting. There might have been a sports of field or outdoor life or field and stream. And we saw those stories about hunting in Africa or something. It's like, man, I would love to do that.
Exactly.
And now you see Kaiser, belly crawling for a whitetail. Now, am I going to try that in Pennsylvania or New York? No. Or Michigan? No. But it gives you a different perspective. And also, I think it educates you on deer behavior, even though it's taking place in a different terrain. It makes other things make sense.
I agree. Let's talk about whitetails for a minute, because if you think about it, when you and I first started the industry, man, states like Montana, Dakotas, I mean, you didn't hear anything about whitetails really west of the Mississippi, right? I mean, they're very few, but in 20 years, that population has exploded, and so did they. My favorite story is we're hunting in Montana, again, with Montana Whitetails Inc., and I shot a really nice whitetail, and I'm all jacked up, and we're driving it down in the truck, and one of the property owners stopped by, and he's talking to the owner of the place, and they said, "Oh, you got a nice one, huh?" And we're all jacked up, and he looks in the back of the truck, he goes, "Oh, it's a whitetail." And like totally deflated me. I hear him looking at a 140-inch whitetail, and literally he's like, "Oh, those are like fleas now." You know what I mean? He didn't care. Yeah.
Well, and plus they did it, and there's a story there because the mule deer population is in peril across the mule deer states. And that's not because of overhunting; it's because of habitat and other things. But it's a different thing out there.
It is.
Whitetails now. Like you said, back then it was kind of like a a novelty.
Yeah.
Now these states, Nebraska's got awesome whitetail
Yeah.
hunting, incredible, but they don't really. They'd rather have the mule deer if they could have them.
Oh yeah.
The other thing that's changed for me personally, maybe not so much for you because you were more of on cutting edge when you were growing up. You lived in a spot with awesome deer population. We didn't have that across our state, but for me, it was tree stand hunting.
Oh yeah.
Because when I first started hunting out of a tree, even for television 20 years ago, there were spots that we went to that deer just were not exposed to hunters, especially from above. And that to me was very eye-opening. But now it's like, find a place like that anymore. You can't.
You don't. So you think about that. Back when you and I were in college, there wasn't even really commercial tree stands out there, and the first one was Baker. And me being a college kid, they were too expensive. But I looked at one and I was like, I can build this. So we built our own.
Did you really?
Oh yeah. So we built the same. Probably was a death trap, right?
You know what I mean? How did you survive that?
Yeah. So a couple times we did lose it, and you had to belly, hang onto the tree and
slide down. They called it something. They had a name for it.
But then when I got in the industry, when I started here in '93, API was out there with quality stands, and some of the other manufacturers did, right? Yeah, and literally it changed the way I hunted because now we started using all the hang-ons with tree steps and, definitely. And now it's weird. I'm hunting same 20 feet and I'm hunting out of a ladder stand. And back then you only had a ladder stand at 10 or 12 feet. So it's so interesting. And what's the rage now? Saddles. So guys aren't even using stands anymore. They're getting up that tree.
Or blinds or, hard side blinds.
Yeah.
Banks blinds. Nice and comfortable, and maybe that's because of the aging population. But now you put any hunter in a banks blind, and it's like you're sitting there. I mean, food plots that were very novel. You were on the cutting edge of that too.
Yeah. So when we planted our first food plots, you go back, it was biologic. I'll never forget this. So hunting on that same trip that you shot that doe and I shot a pretty good buck. Drury was telling me about biologic, right? They were one of the first. Now Analogics is out there, has great seed, but back in the day, they were the first ones to really do the brassica thing. And he told me how great it was. And we're watching 20 deer a night eating there. I'm like, I'm planting this back home. So I did, and literally I had the best looking brassica plot ever, and not one deer ate it because our deer didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then he told me the secret: you got to put winter wheat or oats or something in there to get them eating in the plot. And then they'll nip it and try it, and pretty soon they'll decide they like it. You fast forward, 5 years after doing that, man, I'd plant the brassicas and they're not supposed to eat them until they freeze, and they're eating them to the, like ground as soon as they're starting to come up. And that's the way it is now. But there's so many more of my neighbors are planting food plots. It's amazing, what they see from, some of them has an oak ridge that they could see the deer eating in my green plots, or the neighbors would ask, what is that green stuff? They're looking at it when everything else is brown and you have this dark green plot, and they're asking, what do you plant? No, I tell everybody, I'm not trying to hide it. I mean, we plant brassicas and they love it, or we have standing beans or whatever. But yeah, back in the day, it was basically Biologic and Whitetail Institute were the two of the first. And
Whitetail Institute with their clover, the whitetail clover.
Yeah.
That's where, if I would look objectively at our television content, initially, our slogan too, Scout, Manage, Hunt. Scouting was, even today, it's critical, but back then it was everything. Because if you didn't have food, you had to know. Charlie taught me this: let the deer show you how to hunt them. And in absence of food, you had to know how they use the topography. You had to. There was no getting around it. Today, that has shifted with manicuring small properties into, as Steve would say, making your land so deer spend a disproportionate amount of time there. So that is a key thing that has changed over the years, not just in hunting, but in how we present it to the public. Because let's face it, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be pretty high that you're doing something if you either own the ground or are leasing the ground.
It's amazing how many mistakes you made, but what you learn is how to manipulate that, your habitat, so that gives you the best odds for success, right? So when I first got into food plots, I was a tester for a couple companies, and I was always afraid to put it, so I put it in the middle of nowhere, and one of them hit a home run, right? Their plot was great, and I had this food plot in the middle of a spot where I couldn't even hunt it, and I'd watch 15 to 20 deer every single night with a shooter deer in that food plot, and there was absolutely no way to hunt it because they're coming off the neighbors, and they were coming off of a bedding area that wasn't even mine. And I'm like, well, lesson learned: never put a food plot in where you cannot actually hunt over it unless it's a destination plot. But we really have, when you mentioned banks or redneck, we've really figured out the method of, putting some of those box blinds on our food plots that are just in killer spots where you're going to get a 15-yard shot. And why I did that is I learned quickly as you have kids, right? And you put a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old now in Wisconsin in an open stand, they can't stay quiet, still. They can't keep quiet. And our success level went through the roof as soon as we started hunting out of a box
My
blind.
favorite clip, I know we've aired this on the show, was your second daughter, Jordan, I believe. You guys are sharing candy in that blind.
Oh, yeah.
It's like she looks like she is just like wired up, but it's one of the cutest clips I think we've ever aired. But that goes to testament of what you just said.
Yeah, when we used to hunt with kids, we'd have Cheetos, candy. Heck, we had when they came out with those little CD video players, we'd have one of those in this so they could watch a movie.
That's what I did with Emily. I would give her Taylor too. I'd give her the phone, and I'd have a Barbie game on there on my phone.
What's amazing is most of those kids never forgot that, because my kids, most of them are older now, right? And my daughter's that's still, Cassie's pushing 30, and she comes home for gun season, and they still love it. They're not into it as much as my boys are. My son Noah eats, sleeps, and drinks it. You know what I mean? So that's great because you passed on that tradition. But the other thing that I noticed is the love of the land, right?
Yeah.
And now you're a landowner, so you can feel it, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you feel so different planting your own food plot than hunting over somebody's.
And it's hard to. I knew it before. I mean, I've owned small properties, several of them, as you know. But to me, it's not about. You plant food plots because you want deer, but it goes way more than that. You're planting trees. You know how much I love apple trees and conifers and doing all that kind of stuff. It really, you're grounded. Ted taught us that. With your hands in the ground, you become one. That is Elder Leopold's land ethic right there. You become one with the land, and it's something that you want to pass on. Now, let's go back to Noah. That buck he killed last year, 165 inches. Your dad, rest his soul, he passed away years ago.
2000, yeah.
What would your dad have thought to see Noah have killed that buck?
He would have been so ecstatic. But what's really interesting
off
is
of your own land.
Yeah. So my dad, you listened to a punk 18-year-old kid that told him what we had to do to deer hunt. Back in the day, we drove with the neighbors during gun season.
Deer drives nonstop, right?
We shot every deer with a horn. I mean, and you can party hunt in Wisconsin legally. And honestly, it was a bad year if I didn't shoot 3 or 4 bucks.
Right.
And he was doing the same thing. And we had my cousins hunted with us, and we always tagged them. And I read deer and deer hunting since it first came out. So for me, I'd read about this in the management. I knew we had the deer, right? So now it's just getting them older. And he listened to what we had to do, and it started with just him giving me 40 acres out of ours that was just nothing but mine. And what he learned,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. What he learned quickly is I was killing as many nicer deer off that 40 than those guys did as a group, because without putting the pressure on, like the deer would
Were you only bow hunting it?
Yeah. So during gun season, we'd leave it, and that's when we started shooting 2-year-olds, which at that time was a giant
big deer.
If you shot a 90-incher, it was just like
a racked buck. Yeah,
it was a talk of the town, right? And he literally, his rule was if you didn't abide by it, you lost your spot to hunt. And out of our big group, we probably had 12 or 13 guys. It ended up being 6 that could pass up
That
deer.
was before anybody was doing this.
Yeah, and then once we cut it down to 6, though, man, we were seeing during the gun season, I'm not saying we killed them, but we were seeing 13, 14 bucks a day, and normally shoot 1 or 2 really nice deer. And from there, it just expanded. The neighbors just would start doing it. And now, our whole area is somewhat managed. Some people are going to still shoot some 2s or 3s, but they're starting to let those deer go.
It really has evolved, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing.
And I know that it's not for everybody, but you can control things. To an extent, it depends on your property. You're blessed. You have a few more acres that you can play with. But you can control it, even if it's just seeing more deer.
Yeah.
Having more opportunities, seeing more turkeys, too. I love that. Okay, Brad, let me ask. We're going to close this out with one. I'm going to let you go first this time.
All right.
We kind of touched on it, but I'm going to let you do it again. What did Deer and Deer Hunting TV bring to television that wasn't already there 20 years ago?
Well, the big thing I'm going to go is, there was no ego, no stardom, no nothing. We were just trying to educate the general population to become better whitetail hunters. And I think we did that very, very well. I think some of the subject matter, people don't know the effort that went into that. We would plan those 13 shows kind of like for content way before, and then try to get that footage.
Remember the meetings?
To support that. Oh yeah, huge meetings, everybody in a room, and we're kicking out some of that information that was just so critical, and try to support that show. And I think nobody was really doing that at the time.
I don't think they were either. I'm going to piggyback on that. There's three things that I think that Deer and Deer Hunting brought to. This is testament to everybody every producer, every editor, every person who's been on camera, every contributor, every viewer. I think Deer and Deer Hunting TV has brought, in 20 years, brought legitimacy, honesty, and humility to outdoors television. And I'm not saying that to boast. That's for me as a passerby watching, because when I see the shows and how they're put together, from 20 years ago to today.
Oh, yeah.
Today, I think the editing is seamless. I think that if you're watching the show, if you know anything about television, there's 4 segments. You're normally going to have an introduction. You're going to have a hunt segment. You're going to have a sponsor segment. Obviously, all these sponsors, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be bringing this show to people. But when you see how it's put together, there is so much thought. Now, those early years, we would sit in a boardroom at Krause Publications with 500 other employees doing other things. They were baseball card collectors and car collectors and toy collectors and stamp collectors. And, oh, by the way, there's this group of deer hunters off in the corner. But we sat there and we said, okay, what we did is, what would my dad want to watch? What would my brother? What would my buddy? What would that guy that I met at the grocery store who's a deer hunter? We talked for deer hunting. What would they want to watch and what would they want to learn? And I have to give credit to Jack Brower, one of the Deer and Deer Hunting founders. When he told me with the magazine, and when I remember when I did some speaking engagements,
yep.
He just said, Dan, we did a lot of those. And the thing that I always try to do is teach somebody something that they didn't know. And because that could be a kid or that could be a guy who's 80. And I think we brought that with every television show. I think there's something within every show that wasn't just, hey, I'm going deer hunting, I'm going to kill a deer today. It was we brought something and educated, or we just fostered that love of the hunt, which David had a great show that will still bring me to tears about my dad last year, that I had so many people stop me and say, that's my dad. That's how my dad, and to me that means a lot because we're embodying, that television show is embodying what deer and deer hunting, the subjects, mean to all of us.
What's interesting too, where you and I are a little older now, you have that full perspective, right, of a whitetail hunter through the ages, and you go from that stage of killing everything that you can, and then you're passing up deer, trying to kill the big thing. Then it's all about trophies, and for me now, it's really about passing it on to the next generation, and honestly, making my farm so that my grandkids or my grandkids' are going to have the ultimate whitetail pies. I mean, we're going to have food plots where you can kill the deer. We're going to have all the cover in the world that you need. We're doing the apples. You know what I mean? Like, They're going to have that whitetail nirvana where all the deer are going to hang out, and they're going to be able to harvest deer for the rest of their life, which is really cool. The other thing I want to bring about humility, back in the early days, I mean, you didn't see another television show really have a miss unless it was an absolute giant.
Yeah.
Dude, we would show our misses no matter what, and some of them are hilarious.
And then rip on each other.
Oh, yeah, and that's
I remember that.
That's what it's about. but so we even did a show of nothing but what was the anatomy of a miss.
Yep.
And my favorite of all time, when you talk about funny, is our producer at that time. he was doing the segment because he kind of wanted to be one of those guys that wanted to be on TV. And a lot of times you don't have that with producers. And we were in our warehouse, and he was talking about this shot replication, and how that makes you a better shot. And literally he's doing it, and he skips an arrow off the cement floor right into the bathroom of the building.
Right.
And I never laughed so hard in my life.
It sounded like a gunshot.
Yeah. The other thing that amazes me over the last 20 years is how good we both are. And I'm not ego. I'm not saying, but if you could go back to the first years, and if you guys could watch the first footage, like cut roll, right, you would laugh hysterically. One of the things we were doing, I was struggling, and I finally got through my segments, and I was going to wait till you got back because we drove over to the warehouse together. And I got the giggles because you could not do it right. And I just, and literally the producer got so mad at me. He kicked me out of there and he was swearing at me and I had to leave. But that's how bad we were.
Oh, I was terrible.
We both were.
Admittedly, I was terrible. I remember standing there like a deer in the headlights, like trying to recite what was in my head. I wasn't prepared for this. I had a couple radio, TV, film classes in college, but I never thought I was going to be doing anything on TV. I'll tell you that right now.
And why were we on TV? It's because we were so cheap as a company.
Exactly.
We're not buying some talent, right? Nope. You are going to be on TV. Yeah. You're going to be on TV.
Congratulations, you're going to be on TV. Yeah, we're going to have a TV show, and you guys are going to be the host.
Yeah, figure it out, right?
Am I going to get more money for it? No, you're not.
Yeah. You are going to get to do a few more trips. That was it.
You get to do a few more trips. And, oh, by the way, you're going to have a producer in the tree with you who has never hunted before and who's dropping shit and not paying attention to scent control. And it's like, try to kill a deer. No.
Yeah. Talk about dropping stuff. That same producer dropped his cell phone off. And here's another case. We're in North Dakota. First day of the hunt, 145-inch deer comes out. He's a beautiful 10. He's going to come out to the food plot. The producer was playing a game on his phone, put it on his knee. When he moved to get the camera on thing, clunk, the camera falls on the ground. Buck runs away. There I sit with my bow in my hand, no harvested deer. So it happens so much. I can't tell you guys. Our new staff, I'm going to say this, I'm going to knock on wood. Other than one of them in Kentucky, maybe we scared some deer, but last year was fantastic. Nobody scared any deer away. I think they do a really good job.
I agree.
They're probably the best group that we've
David,
ever had.
Ian, and Mac, three of the brightest young men
I agree
that I've ever worked with. And I'm not just saying because two of them are sitting right here, but what has impressed me with our current staff is that outside of Mac, I don't think anybody had ever hunted anything before.
Yeah, what I like about that,
but what they've embraced, and that's not just the video guys. I have to say this about the rest of the staff. They embraced this. This is unique. What we have here at Media 360 is we have people who genuinely like coming to work. You don't get that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I've been here and you've been here a year longer than I have been, almost 30 years. You don't get where you actually don't hate coming to work. And then when you see the passion in everybody about this, they don't have to be hunters, but they understand it. And then they're like, yeah, this is actually pretty good. I can get some clean and healthy meat out of it. And it's a fun activity.
Yeah, I agree. What I love about this place is we got all age groups now, really. I mean, we go for kind of the full spectrum. And the perspective is a lot different. Like you're big on social. Everybody knows I'm not a huge social media guy. I do enough on there so I stay competent, but you're on there a lot. But the younger sees videos at work that they know are going to be viral. Oh man, we got this, and then we're creating these viral videos that are going out there, and it's just snowballed our overall, exposure into that market. I mean, we reach 1.4 million whitetail people,
which is insane.
That's insane.
That's like a six. Well, not quite a six, but it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a huge chunk of the people who hunt.
Back in the day when we were only a magazine, since I've started, our largest was 133. Was the paid subs, and now we're in that 100,000 range. But still, we've seen print kind of decline.
Yeah.
You've seen the TV kind of stay the same if you're not just looking at linear TV. TV with the apps, right? But you've seen social just explode.
Yeah, back in those years, everybody in the industry, we were preaching to the same 200,000 people.
Yeah.
But now we have taken that up to it's multiple, like you said, 1.4. 1.4 million people. And on that note, I want to thank everybody who actually downloads the Deer Talk Now podcasts. We have to bring it up that Spotify is now has it. So if that's your deal, you can download it on Spotify or wherever else you're getting it. I'm going to cut us off, Brad, on a great topic, but you and I could sit here and reminisce all day, but we're gonna leave everybody on that and say thank you. I'm going to let you finish.
No, I thank everybody for tuning in and honestly, just getting the word out there and seeing how much people enjoy it. Let us know through Facebook, through comments. We love to hear your input. Even back in the day, it was ahead of its time. We did Deer Talk Now, and it was semi-live, right? We were letting people ask.
It was live.
We were letting people ask questions.
Plugged in with the phone, and then we were like, how were we doing that? Off of email?
Yeah, no, remember they'd message us through Facebook, through social, and we're getting those up.
And then we were like reading them.
Their
somebody
questions
was printing
off.
them off, and like I was getting them. It was almost like an old-time news desk.
But I love that. I love that interaction because that's what really drives me when I know that we can make somebody a better whitetail hunter or a better, steward of the land. That's what really drives me, and I think that's what drives the rest of us. So give us your input. You want to see something, let us know, and let us try to be the best, Media 360 deer and deer hunting that we can be.
Amen. Thank you, Brad, and thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. We will catch you next Thursday for another episode of Deer Talk Now. For Brad Rucks, I am Dan Schmidt. We will catch you next week.